Hello and welcome to Jelim's Storytime. I'm Jess, otherwise known by my author moniker Jelim, and today I am reading out Chapter 7 of The Blood King. For those of you who have not been listening to The Blood King, I would recommend you go back to the beginning in episode 4 of Storytime and start from there, because otherwise it won't make much sense. So without further ado, here we go. Chapter 7. What drew Kelsey to the quaint little diner called Ellen's was the atmosphere. Small town, big appetites, and merry laughter that had her smiling the minute she was within a block of the place. She was 10 minutes late because Lawrence had decided to lecture on how bad of an idea it was to go to a history study session and how careful she had to be with what she said. Considering the fact that Dimitri was sitting smugly to the side for the duration of it, she figured he had something to do with instigating it. It was not as if she was unaware of the risks, but she could sense that something important was going to happen tonight. She couldn't place what it was. She rarely could ever until it happened. But it was important, and as such, she wouldn't ignore it. Dimitri and Lawrence were no doubt already at Ellen's. As brothers, they were often competitive about things. Pool was one of them. Lawrence, surprisingly to some, was the dominant player, something Dimitri wasn't impressed with. So unimpressed was he that more than a few pool tables had been ruined in his quest to defeat his older brother. Kelsey had refused to pay for another one after number 5 had been scratched and dinted until it was unusable. Hence, they came to Ellen's, a place where their vampiric powers couldn't be used to advantage in any visible way. She figured it would at least challenge Dimitri to play fair. Kelsey couldn't help but smile at the memory of Dimitri playing against Damien, the Russian Lycan. He'd been obliterated in that game despite his will to cheat. Lycans didn't like to lose. It was a good thing Damien hadn't too, because a Lycan's temper was something to fear. It had led to more than a few brutal slaughters. However, Lycans were so rare now that Kelsey hadn't encountered one other than Damien for years. That she knew of, there were only 5 or 6 in existence. Their werewolf descendants were vast in number, their blood less pure with animal instincts and power, and far easier to reason with. She'd rather her brothers take on werewolves if their temper got the better of them than Lycans. That was for sure. As Kelsey approached Ellen's diner, she noticed that Ashley was waiting for her outside. The young woman had drawn her brother's attention, as was clear from lunch earlier that day, but Kelsey doubted she could keep it. Dimitri, as tough as he appeared to be, didn't often endeavour to create a relationship. He'd had one too many heartbreaks over the years, and had resolved himself to the reality that he was unlikely to find someone that he could spend forever with. This, however, could not persuade Kelsey not to prod and poke the human to make a move. Her brother needed a little comfort that was not familial every now and then. Kelsey knew it the minute she was spotted as Ashley waved to her with a smile on her face. Kelsey jogged to meet her, returning the smile. "You didn't have to wait for me out here in the cold," said Kelsey. "Don't be silly. It would have been awkward for you if you got lost," said Ashley. Kelsey smiled, as if she could get lost in a place she'd called home for 4 centuries. "Not many places to get lost here. Blue Valley's pretty small." "But the woods are extensive," said Ashley seriously. "I got lost once when I was 7. Took them a full day to find me." "Whoa," said Kelsey. She did have to agree about the woods. They were pretty extensive. An awkward silence fell between the two before Ashley led Kelsey inside the diner, which was already bustling with afternoon customers. The 2-story diner offered a great small-town vibe that Kelsey couldn't stop grinning from. The emotions teeming inside also had something to do with it. Sometimes, when she felt strong emotions, Kelsey was unable to distinguish between emotions that were foreign and those that were her own. As such, they influenced her emotional state. She'd learned to accept it over the years rather than try and fight it. It gave her power more readily if she learned to go with the flow. The bar was the central part of the ground floor in a sunken area that had wooden railings surrounding it. All around it were stools that were already half full with younger adults. On the other side of the railing were booths built in to fit to large groups. A couple of them were full, but most remained empty. Their low backs offered little privacy, but it was rare to find something like that in a small town anyway. Tables and chairs filled the rest of the ground floor, and a small stage filled the back wall. It was currently bare, but Kelsey remembered her last visit when there had been a local band there. A wide staircase filled the far corner leading to the upper level. Above the stage were an assortment of pool tables and walkways on either side that led to the area above the entrance that was no doubt left for private events. "It's a generous size for a small town," commented Kelsey. "It's a bar, diner and event space," said Ashley, "so it's kinda small really." Kelsey continued to smile as she followed Ashley to one of the booths, attempting to not make her smile appear creepy when she met the two geeky-looking boys and a dark-skinned girl who awaited them in the booth was a challenge. Though, from one look, Kelsey was disappointed to see that it was not the other members of the study group that had drawn her here. They were all too ordinary and human. The first boy had red hair that was chopped unevenly, the longest bits falling to his jawline. He wore a black and white checkered scarf and a thin grey cardigan pulled over a plain dark blue shirt. From what Kelsey could see, his white jeans had suspenders hanging down either side, and Kelsey expected Converse to go with it. His eyes were a mint green that seemed odd but suited him nonetheless. The second boy was dressed in dark wash, ripped skinny jeans and an open green flannel shirt over the white top. He had dark brown, almost black hair that was styled in a messy fashion and brown eyes that looked passionate in whatever argument he was undertaking with the remaining youth. The girl looked short for her age, her ice blue eyes popping with the contrast of her dark skin tone. She had long black curls that were thrown haphazardly into a makeshift bun. She wore a simple shirt explaining that she was not short but fun size, and a red zip-up hoodie that accompanied her light skinny jeans. Kelsey let their innocence watch over her as she tuned into their conversation. "But what you're saying is physically impossible," the girl explained. "Thor would not fit in Iron Man's armour." "What about the Hulkbuster armour?" asked the black-haired boy. "That's massive." "Because it was made to take out the Hulk, you idiot," said the girl. "And all the armour is suited to fit Tony Stark anyway, so I have no idea why we're having this conversation." "I don't either, considering that Thor is practically indestructible and can fly and kick ass without the armour," said the boy with the scarf. The two were silent for a moment before the other boy spoke up. "That's beside the point, Drew. Don't make the argument invalid. Someone has to win." "Well, at this point, I would say it's Ridley," said Drew. "If you want to win, you should make a valid argument." "Hey guys," Ashley cut in. And thank goodness, because Kelsey had half a mind to talk about several supernatural species who would have brought all the popular superheroes of the film age down with little effort. "This is Kelsey. She's new around here, but I invited her to join our group because she's doing history." "You're that ass Dimitri's sister, aren't you?" asked Drew. Kelsey paused. Yes." "You poor, poor soul," said Ridley after a short silence. "Come, sit next to Dr. Ridley and tell us all about his godly perfection." The boys scoffed and rolled their eyes in unison as Kelsey sat down. "Well, I don't think I can do that, but I can point you in the direction of a group that feels the same way." "Oh?" asked Ridley. Kelsey pointed towards Rianne and her friends who were situated across the diner. Ridley's face dropped. Figures it'd be Rianne that got to him first. "He's corrupted now, there's no turning back." Kelsey smiled. "My brother may be an arse, but he has standards too. That girl is low enough on the scale that he'll cringe when she starts talking." The dark-haired boy covered a loud laugh as Ashley slid in next to him, smiling at Kelsey's comment. "Well, we better get down to business. This is Ridley, Drew, and Peter." She pointed to them in order, from the dark-skinned girl to the boy with the checkered scarf and then the black-haired boy sitting beside her. "Lovely to meet you, and might I say it's an honour to meet a fellow redhead," said Drew with a blank expression. He's being sarcastic, said Ridley. He hates that you've stolen his thunder by being prettier than he is. Drew's green eyes snapped to Ridley, who smiled sweetly at him before turning to Ashley. So what's the topic today? Dunno. Janice has yet to give me a topic, said Ashley. Said she'd be here soon, though. Janice? Kelsey asked confusedly. Oh, she graduated last year, but she's like the go-to person on this town's history, said Ridley. She knows everything. Oh, so what stuff has she told you about Blue Valley? Asked Kelsey, her interest spiking as to whether or not it was correct. The group looked at one another before Peter spoke. Here's the thing, what's discussed in this group can't actually be used in class because Janice is a little inventive as to historical events. I think she's partially crazy, but she makes it sound totally believable, explained Ridley. Makes what sound believable? Asked Kelsey, in faint confusion. Well, started Ashley, supposedly Blue Valley was originally founded by a coven of witches that fled the witch trials in Europe. Kelsey smirked. Sounds like a fun topic. It was, considering the amount Janice could dig up on it. She had first-hand accounts of mystical events and records of witch burnings, said Peter. It's fun trying to fill in the gaps. Kelsey frowned in thought. Any family names? Dwyer, said Drew. Olivia Dwyer is a classmate, though in the sophomore year level. She's a little weird, but no signs of being an actual witch, said Ridley. Kelsey thought of the dark-haired girl who told her she wasn't welcome that morning. She suspected this was her name. The one we thought was really unlikely was O'Connor, as in Rhiannon O'Connor, said Peter. No way in hell is that correct. Hey, your last name was Frey, wasn't it? Asked Ashley. Yeah, why? Kelsey asked. Frey was one of the founding families, though there aren't any left in Blue Valley. Haven't been for some time, explained Ridley. Huh, must be a coincidence, said Kelsey. I don't think my family comes from here. Wouldn't it be weird if that was true, though? Asked Peter. You might have some magic in your blood. He laughed with the table and Kelsey laughed at how close he was to the truth. It was certainly a strange thing, talking about her life like it was just a possibility. They were so naive to the world around them. It was probably best that it stayed that way. Just then, a crazy-eyed, sandy-blonde young woman burst through the door of the diner. Kelsey immediately felt the sense that this woman was familiar, but knew the two of them had never met before. Kelsey would know if it was the same person because of their emotional aura. Some things were just unique and never changed. As the young woman spotted the group and began jogging over, Kelsey registered where the familiar feeling was coming from. This young woman was a descendant of somebody Kelsey had met before, a witch bloodline. Watching this young woman, though, it was clear she wasn't connected with Capricorn. Kelsey would be able to sense that alliance. Had she been abandoned, neglected, forgotten? It was not uncommon in bloodlines that severed ties with covens. The woman fumbled with some papers as she placed her bag down beside the table. You guys are not going to believe what I just found out. Hey Janice, it's nice to see you, said Ridley sarcastically. Hope you don't mind, but Kelsey here is joining us. Janice paused and looked at Kelsey, her green eyes widening. Janice was dressed in a floral sundress with ripped leggings, combat boots and a leather jacket. She looked a cross between girly and badass that Kelsey was all too preoccupied to work out. You're Kelsey Frey? Asked Janice. Yes, Kelsey replied hesitantly, using it as a front as she cautiously allowed her senses to expand towards Janice. It was only a quick contact with her aura that Kelsey needed to confirm her suspicions. This girl was definitely of a witch's bloodline, though she didn't seem the least bit aware of it. Wow, said Janice. I've been wanting to have a look inside Carpathy House for years. I hope that isn't too much of a problem. Oh, said Kelsey, slightly at ease now that this potential new threat was put behind her. You're quite welcome to come over. I didn't know my family's home was of so much interest to the general public. It's a 17th century mansion owned by the original Frey family, said Janice, and they were suspected of being witches. One was burnt at the stake, actually. Juliana Frey, I think, was her name. Kelsey forced a smile at her mother's name. How interesting. Well, you're welcome to come over tomorrow night. I'm sure my brothers won't mind. Awesome, said Janice. Maybe we can all go. She looked around to the others in the group who nodded. Sure, we're happy to come. Cool. Anyway, I found out that the old Dyer house has been occupied. A guy named Vincent Lorenzo, said Janice. Is it just me, or does that name sound really hot? Asked Ridley absent-mindedly. It's got a certain ring to it, agreed Ashley. As the group began to talk more about Dyer House, Kelsey looked up at the time. Shoot, she said as she stood from the booth. I'm sorry, guys. I promised Lawrence I'd be home by 6. I'll see you tomorrow? Yeah, said Ashley. Sorry, Kelsey repeated as she made her way to the entrance of the diner and out onto the street. As interesting as it was to hang out with teenagers who thought they had Blue Valley all figured out, Kelsey needed to start preparing for whatever the Coven and Vincent would throw at her brothers. Whatever it was sure to be a challenge. Janice was surely the something she'd been drawn to, but she had yet to figure out why. No doubt that too would be on her list of things to work out. Lawrence watched as his sister made her escape on the floor below. No doubt the humans had bored her after she discovered whatever it was that was calling to her here. His sister was like that. There was only so long she could keep up an act. It was why they all preferred the supernatural world. At least they understood and wouldn't judge. Humans were fickle in that sense. They were unable to see beyond their own morals. Lawrence supposed it probably came from being the weakest race out there. No magic, no outstanding abilities, no nothing. Just their ill-conceived morals and the will to survive. He respected them for that at least, unlike the Fae who condemned them as insects. If the courts had their way, the humans wouldn't exist, that was for sure. She gone? Asked Dimitri, lining up his shot with the pool cue. Lawrence turned his gaze back to the game that he and his brother were having. Like she's running from a bank robbery, Lawrence replied, a small smile on his face. Dimitri rolled his eyes, making the shot. The white ball shot across the table, ricocheting off the side into 2 of Dimitri's balls, both of which proceeded to sink into adjacent holes. Dimitri didn't seem the least bit excited as he stood and proceeded to line up his next shot. That a girl, Dimitri sighed. Leave before she's in too deep. You know what happens when she does get too embroiled in conflict, Lawrence reasoned. Be grateful that she's aware of it. For the world would probably pay for it if she wasn't. Calcinia may have been the youngest of the 3 siblings, but she was also the most formidable. Lawrence had always viewed it as a curse of empathic witches. He'd seen it take its toll on his mother, and he'd watched for centuries as his sister fought it too. He couldn't help but feel glad that he would never know what it was like to have such limitless power, but to always feel the consequences of it. It didn't matter if something was alive or not. An empathic witch couldn't just shut down and ignore the emotions around them. They were always aware, always feeling. Meanwhile, all her brothers could do was sit back and watch, always trying to be in the same mindset, but never quite there. Dimitri was better at it than Lawrence, but he failed to show it a lot of the time. Just as Dimitri made another shot, a hand swerved down and snatched the white ball from the table. Dimitri and Lawrence snapped their attention towards the intruder who now stood with a cunning grin at the end of their table. The brothers knew it was a vampire before his red eyes flashed. Well, 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 it's rare I encounter a fellow Syed outside Lorenzo's household, the vampire mused. Lawrence could smell it on him, the fledgling in him. In the traditional way a vampire was made, a sire, the one who turned the vampire, would teach the new vampire the laws and customs of their race, as well as how to hunt and function without killing everything in sight. Dimitri and Lawrence hadn't been raised by Vincent, a fact both of them were thankful for every day, but that was only because of their mother's and Kelsey's intervention. Vincent was very old and had sired thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of vampires. He always had at least 5 of his sire in his care. Some were fledglings, those within the first 10 years or so of their immortal lives. Others were simply loyal to the old man. This vampire, the one that apparently wanted to show off to his older brothers, couldn't be more than 7 years since his turning. "What do you want, kid?" asked Dimitri. To anyone else it would seem strange that Dimitri, posing as an 18-year-old, was calling a man who appeared to be in his late 20s a kid. But Dimitri was 421. This man was a kid to him. The fledgling seemed angered by Dimitri's address. So is that how it works? Do you just get on by insults and petty games of pool? Lawrence rolled his eyes. Look, are you here on orders from your master, or are you here because you're bored and wanted to see what all the fuss was about? Either way, my brother would be more than happy to show you your place, kid. The white ball was crushed to dust as the fledgling appraised the two brothers. Anger issues were a common part of being a fledgling. It was another reason why their sires kept them on a short leash. Lawrence glanced around to make sure that his display hadn't been noticed. Then he turned back as Dimitri stepped forward towards the fledgling. We wouldn't have to call you kid if you gave us a name, Dimitri said. But we'll wait for that thought to sink in through the blood haze so that you can handle this situation without making it escalate. My brother and I rather like this town. We'd rather not have you ruin it from a petty argument. Abilities tended to increase with age, slowly but surely. This is why Dimitri found it so easy to take hold of the fledgling's hands to restrain him while he calmed down, casually leaning on the pool table in the process. Aaron, the fledgling ground out. My name is Aaron. My name is Lawrence, and this is my brother Dimitri, Lawrence indicated. Now do yourself a favour, fledgling, and run back to your sire. You're too unstable and could risk a lot of lives by staying here. I highly doubt you want Vincent hunting you. He's had a few millennium to practice disciplining his fledglings, and I guarantee you it won't be just a slap on the wrist, Dimitri warned. He released the fledgling, who stepped back, massaging his own wrists. He looked back and forth between Dimitri and Lawrence, weighing his options, then he walked out of the diner. Dimitri and Lawrence turned to look at one another, the unspoken truth there. Vincent wasn't alone on that estate, a fact Kelsey had likely forgotten to mention. He had his side with him, and any number of them could be a problem. Dimitri and Lawrence would have enough trouble with Vincent. They could only hope that not all the side agreed with their master's opinions. Well, that's it for Chapter 7 of The Blood King. I hope you all enjoyed that. We met quite a few new characters in there. Which one are you looking forward to seeing again? I hope you're all remaining happy and healthy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.